Sir, economy board's last. You clearly can't read the zones on your ticket. Need me to explain numbers to you? Captain Derek Holloway's voice carried through gate B-17 with deliberate volume. Every head in the jetway turned. Colonel Jack Morrison stood at the threshold of the Boeing 777, his weathered hand gripping a faded Air Force backpack that looked older than most of the passengers. The fluorescent lights overhead hummed against the low roar of engines warming up outside. The smell of jet fuel and stale airport coffee mixed with the tension crackling through the cramped space. Holloway stepped out of the cockpit, his Rolex catching the light as he planted himself in Morrison's path. The old man's white hair was cut military short. A faint scar ran down his neck, disappearing beneath his worn flannel collar. He said nothing, just stood there, quiet, his pale blue eyes steady. We don't have all day, Grandpa. Some of us have actual important connections to make. Behind Morrison, the gate agent shifted uncomfortably. Inside the cabin, 287 passengers watched. Some looked away. A few pulled out their phones. First Officer Lisa Chen appeared in the cockpit doorway, her expression uncertain but silent. She didn't interfere. Flight attendant, can we get a wheelchair for this passenger? He seems confused about basic boarding procedures. Laughter rippled through the cabin. Not everyone, but enough. Morrison's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. His hand moved to his jacket pocket, fingers brushing something small inside. Then he lowered his head slightly and stepped forward, squeezing past Holloway's shoulder without a word. Look at him shuffling down the aisle. We're going to be delayed because someone's too old to travel. Holloway announced it loudly as if performing for an audience. Morrison didn't turn. He moved down the aisle slowly, his gait stiff but deliberate. His backpack bumped against seat 23C. He muttered a quiet apology and kept moving. The cabin felt hot. Recycled air hissed from overhead vents. Somewhere near the front, a baby started crying. Maybe next time try Greyhound. More your speed. Literally. That one hit harder. The laughter was louder this time. Morrison finally reached his seat in the back, 34E, middle row, middle seat. He folded himself in carefully, placed his backpack beneath the seat in front of him, and closed his eyes. His breathing was slow, controlled. The kind of calm that comes from years of practice. Holloway strutted back into the cockpit, shaking his head at Chen. She didn't smile back. If you've ever felt underestimated because of your age or experience, write "never give up" in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe. This story is just getting started, and you won't want to miss what happens next. Transglobal Flight 447 pushed back from the gate 26 minutes late. The storm rolling across Denver had grounded 3 other flights, but Holloway was determined to make up time. The engines roared as the 777 taxied toward runway 34R. Morrison sat motionless in his seat, hands folded in his lap. The man next to him, a college kid with noise-canceling headphones, never looked up from his phone. The takeoff was smooth. The plane banked hard to the east, climbing fast through gray clouds thick as wool. Ice crystals peppered the windows. Within 20 minutes, they leveled off at 39,000 feet. The seatbelt sign dinked off. The cabin settled into the usual rhythm of a long flight. Magazines flipping, drinks rolling down the aisle, quiet conversations about layovers and luggage. Morrison didn't move. His eyes stayed closed. But his right hand rested on his jacket pocket, fingers tracing the outline of something rectangular and solid. 90 minutes into the flight, somewhere over Kansas, the cockpit went dark. Not the lights. The radios. Chen was mid-sentence when the VHF radio crackled once and died. The backup frequency hissed static, then nothing. The transponder display blinked out. The ACARS data link flatlined. Holloway's hands froze on the yoke. His face went rigid. What the hell? He jabbed at the comm panel. Nothing. He switched frequencies. Dead. He slapped the console. Still nothing. Chen checked the breakers. She was already moving, her fingers flying over the overhead panel. Every breaker was in position. Every backup system showed normal, but the radios were gone, completely silent. Holloway's breathing quickened. His Rolex glinted as he reached for the emergency frequency selector. He twisted the dial to 121.5 MHz, the universal distress channel. Static. He tried 243.0 MHz, the military guard frequency. Nothing. Outside the cockpit, the cabin continued its oblivious routine. A flight attendant poured ginger ale into a plastic cup. A businessman typed on his laptop. The baby in row 12 had finally fallen asleep. But in the cockpit, panic was setting in. "We're blind," Chen whispered. Her voice was tight. "Holloway, we're completely blind." He didn't respond. His eyes were locked on the weather radar ahead. A massive storm system stretched across their entire route, a wall of red and purple cells that looked like a living, breathing monster. They couldn't go through it, they couldn't go around it, and they couldn't talk to anyone. Holloway grabbed the handset again. His voice came through the PA system, clipped and tense. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain. We're experiencing a minor technical issue. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened." Minor. The word tasted like a lie. Chen was already scanning the approach charts for Denver. "Holloway, we need to turn back. Now." "I know." He banked the aircraft hard to the left. The storm loomed in the windshield like a god. The plane shuddered as it turned. Passengers gasped. Drinks spilled. Someone yelled. And then, on the ground, someone noticed. Denver Center had been trying to reach Flight 447 for 3 minutes. When the transponder vanished, their screens lit up red. Protocol was immediate and unforgiving. Within 60 seconds, 2 F-16 Fighting Falcons scrambled from Buckley Air Force Base, afterburners screaming as they clawed into the sky. Their orders were clear: intercept, identify, and if necessary, neutralize. In the cabin of Flight 447, no one knew they were being hunted, except one man. Morrison opened his eyes. He didn't check his watch, didn't look out the window. He simply stood, his movements slow and deliberate, and began walking toward the front of the plane. The same shuffling gait Holloway had mocked, the same quiet presence. But now, his hand was in his jacket pocket, gripping something tightly. A flight attendant named Patricia, 55 years old and a veteran of 32 years with the airline, saw him coming. She stepped forward, her smile professional but strained. "Sir, the captain has asked everyone to remain seated." Morrison didn't stop. His voice was soft but unyielding. "I need to speak to the captain. Sir, I need to speak to the captain, now." Something in his tone made her step aside. Morrison reached the cockpit door. It was locked. He knocked once, firm and controlled. Chen glanced at Holloway. He shook his head. "Go away. We're busy." Morrison knocked again. Harder this time. Holloway twisted in his seat, fury flashing across his face. He jabbed the intercom button. "I said go away, old man. This is a cockpit, not a—" "Captain," Morrison interrupted, his voice amplified through the intercom. "You have no comms, no transponder, and 2 F-16s inbound on your 6. Open this door, or everyone on this plane dies." The cockpit went silent. Chen's face went white. Holloway's mouth opened and closed, no sound coming out. Outside the windshield, 2 dark shapes appeared in the distance, closing fast. Chen hit the door release. Morrison stepped inside. The cockpit smelled like sweat and fear. Holloway was half out of his seat, his face twisted with confusion and rage. "Who the hell do you think you—" Morrison ignored him. He moved directly to the comm panel, his hand steady despite the turbulence shaking the plane. He reached down and switched the VHF radio to 243.0 MHz manually, bypassing the dead primary system. Then he pulled a small, battered AN/PRC-90 survival radio from his jacket pocket. The olive-drab casing was scratched and worn. The antenna was bent, but the frequency dial still worked. Holloway stared. "This frequency never dies, Captain." Morrison slipped on the headset. His fingers moved over the radio with the ease of muscle memory carved over decades. He keyed the mic and spoke, his voice calm and clear, in a cadence that hadn't been used in American military communications since the 1990s. "Guard frequency, this is Ghost. Ghost Morrison. Call sign Alpha Tango 79er. Emergency transponder failure on civilian aircraft. Boeing 777, flight level 390, coordinates approximate 38.5 north, 101.2 west. Request immediate relay to Denver Center and confirm interceptor status. Over." Silence. Then a voice crackled through the headset, sharp and stunned. "Say again." Ghost? Ghost Morrison? Affirmative. Ghost Morrison. Confirm call sign, Alpha Tango 79er. I am aboard Transglobal 447. Repeat, civilian aircraft in distress. Require communication relay. Another pause. Longer this time. When the voice returned, it was different. Older. Reverent. Ghost. This is NORAD Mountain Home. Call sign confirmed. Sir. Jesus Christ, sir. We have you on radar. F-16s are ours. They're RTB now. Sir, what's your status? Morrison exhaled slowly. Comms failure. Total. Backup VHF inoperable. Using personal PRC-90 on guard. Need alternate route to Denver around weather cell bearing 090. Advise. Stand by, Ghost. Holloway sat frozen in his seat. His hands were shaking. Chen had one hand over her mouth, her eyes wide and wet. She was staring at Morrison like she'd seen a ghost. Literally. The radio crackled again. Ghost. NORAD. We're coordinating with Denver Center. F-16s will escort you on heading 270. Descend to flight level 280. We'll vector you around the cell. Estimate 40 minutes to Denver. You are cleared direct. Copy, NORAD. Heading 270. Descend to 280. Ghost out. Morrison set down the headset. He turned to Holloway, who was still staring, mouth half open. Captain, you'll want to start that descent. Holloway didn't move. Chen reached over and pulled the yoke gently, banking the aircraft to the new heading. Her voice was a whisper. Colonel Morrison? Morrison glanced at her, his expression soft. Just Jack, ma'am. Chen's tears spilled over. She nodded, unable to speak. Morrison turned and walked out of the cockpit. The door clicked shut behind him. He moved back down the aisle, his hand trailing along the seatbacks for balance. The passengers were oblivious. Most didn't even look up. But Patricia, the flight attendant, was standing near the galley, her face ashen. She'd heard everything through the cockpit intercom. When Morrison passed, she straightened instinctively, almost like a salute. He gave her a small nod and kept walking. Back in the cockpit, Chen pulled out her iPad. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely type. She searched. Colonel Jack Morrison, Air Force Ghost. The results made her gasp. Holloway, she whispered. Holloway, look at this. He didn't respond. He was staring straight ahead, his hands locked on the yoke, his face the color of old paper. Chen read aloud, her voice cracking. Colonel Jack Morrison. Call sign Ghost. Silver Star. Distinguished Flying Cross. Purple Heart. 3 times shot down in Vietnam. Rescued 12 downed air crews using emergency frequencies. Instrumental in developing survival radio protocols still used by the Air Force. Retired 1998. Considered a legend in USAF survival training. She looked up at Holloway. He was crying, silently, tears running down his cheeks. Oh my God, he whispered. Oh my God, what did I do? You've stayed with me this far. What do you think happens next? Drop your prediction in the comments, and if you're not subscribed yet, hit that button now. You don't want to miss the landing. The descent took 38 minutes. Outside the windows, the F-16s appeared, sleek and lethal, one on each wingtip. Passengers pressed their faces to the glass, pointing and whispering. The fighters stayed close, their navigation lights blinking in perfect formation. Morrison sat in his seat, eyes closed again, hands folded. He didn't look out the window. When the wheels touched down at Denver, the plane erupted in applause. But it wasn't for Holloway. Word had spread. Patricia had told another attendant, who told a passenger, who told the man in 12A. That man, Major Rick Torres, U.S. Army, in uniform on his way to Fort Carson, stood up the moment the plane stopped rolling. Attention. His voice cut through the cabin like a whip crack. 80% of the passengers stood immediately. The rest scrambled up a moment later, confused but instinctively obedient. There is a man on this aircraft, Torres said, his voice shaking with emotion, who just saved every single life on board. Colonel Jack Morrison, United States Air Force. Retired. Hero. Sir, if you're listening, we owe you everything. The cabin exploded. Applause so loud it rattled the overhead bins. Whistles, shouts. Someone started chanting, USA! USA! Morrison didn't move. His head was down. His shoulders trembled slightly. As the plane taxied toward the gate, something unusual appeared outside. A line of vehicles, fire trucks, airport police, and a black SUV with 2-star plates. The jetway connected. The door opened. And Major General Richard Caldwell, commander of Buckley Air Force Base, stepped aboard. He was in dress blues. His ribbons covered half his chest. He walked down the aisle with purpose, his eyes scanning the seats until they landed on Morrison. The general stopped. He saluted. Morrison slowly stood. He returned the salute, his movements stiff but precise. "Colonel Morrison," Caldwell said, his voice thick. "The Air Force never forgot you. Welcome home, Ghost." He pulled Morrison into a tight embrace. The cabin erupted again. Patricia was sobbing openly. Chen, standing in the cockpit doorway, saluted with tears streaming down her face. Holloway stood behind her, his face buried in his hands. General Caldwell stepped back and turned to address the cabin. "Ladies and gentlemen, this man is a legend. He has saved more lives than most of us will ever meet, and today he saved yours." The applause went on for 4 full minutes. Then Caldwell turned to the cockpit. His expression went cold. "Captain Holloway, step out here, please." Holloway emerged, his face pale, his hands trembling. Caldwell's voice was ice. "Captain, this man is the reason frequencies like GUARD exist. He saved your aircraft, your passengers, and your career. If I ever hear you disrespected another veteran, in uniform or out, I will personally see to it that you never fly again. Do you understand me?" Holloway nodded, unable to speak. At that moment, a phone rang in the cockpit. Chen answered, her voice shaky. "It's the CEO. He wants it on speaker." The voice of Martin Cross, CEO of Transglobal Airlines, filled the cabin. "Captain Holloway, you are hereby suspended for 90 days without pay, pending a full investigation into your conduct. Colonel Morrison, sir, on behalf of Transglobal, I offer you lifetime complimentary first-class travel on any of our flights, anywhere in the world." Morrison shook his head gently. "I flew for my country, not for perks. But thank you, sir." The CEO's voice softened. "Then thank you, Colonel, for everything." Morrison picked up his backpack and walked toward the exit. The passengers formed a corridor, standing in silence as he passed. At the door, General Caldwell fell into step beside him. Outside on the tarmac, the 2 F-16 pilots stood at attention, their helmets under their arms. Morrison walked between them. They saluted as one. He returned the salute and kept walking, disappearing into the black SUV without looking back. Inside the cabin, on seat 34E, something small sat on the cushion. Patricia found it a few minutes later. The old AN/PRC-90 survival radio, and beneath it, a handwritten note on the back of a boarding pass: "For the next pilot who forgets that old frequency, save lives." Ghost, what did you think of this story? Did Colonel Morrison get the respect he deserved? Share your thoughts in the comments, and if you haven't already, subscribe for more stories that honor our forgotten heroes. And don't go anywhere. Click the video on your screen right now. You need to see what happens when a drill sergeant walks into a restaurant and hears a voice he never thought he'd hear again. Trust me, you won't regret it.